What's up, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of On the Bluff. I'm your host, Christian Fowler, and joining me this week is our producer, Kenny Stubblefield. We are minus Gabe Coon, so it's me and Kenny this week. Kenny, what's up, brother?
Man, it's officially cold, bro. I am so cold. I'm over here in my office. I've got I'd show underneath the desk what's going on here, but I've got this foot massager. Have you seen the TikTok foot massager?
Yeah.
I
Is it
got one
heated?
for I got one for Tracy, and it's a heated foot massager. And I got this thing rolling on overtime right now because it is warm. My feet are nice and massaged and hot. Like it is cold, dude. I'm
It,
freezing.
yeah, it's real. I thought you were going to say you had a space heater under there. That would have been even better.
No. Would that have been better? Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think
have
that would have been
I
even
don't
better.
have a space heater. I don't believe in space heaters.
Why
I don't
not?
because you have to be in a tight space for space heaters to work, especially the size of space heaters that I have.
We all have them at the office under our desks, and it's great.
Oh yeah, okay. Maybe I'll try it out.
You give it a shot.
I'll give
It'll
it a
keep your
shot.
feet warm. But I mean, you
Dude,
guys
you've
go
been
to that.
outside. You've been outside working today though, man. How are you
No,
feeling,
very
bro?
little, very little. I tried to stay inside today, not outside.
Jesus.
But before we get started, Kenny, any notes from the weekend?
Yeah, man, my daughter had flu the entire weekend. So we were quarantined, stuck in the house, taking care of her. So thankfully she's on the mend, but she had a rough go of it this weekend. So low key, just trying to make sure she's healthy and doing okay.
I moved this weekend for the first time since I was 6. So
How much
20.
do you hate that?
It's not fun. It is not fun. I've been in the same house since right before. I think it was right before my 6th birthday, 2004,
Yeah.
and so we are officially out.
Moving is no good, man. Like we a couple of years ago, we started going down this path at the house of trying to decide if we were going to put in a swimming pool. And
I remember this. Yeah.
it was going to be like we went down the path, we had it all mapped out, we had it all planned out, we got some proposals from different people, and the price was just like no. Like that's
I remember you calling me and like I was expecting this, and it came back and it was double the expectation. You're like, no, it's not. It's just not going to happen. It's
yeah,
not.
it's like so Tracy and I sat down and we were like, what do we do here? And do we do the pool? For those that don't know, my son is on the spectrum. And pools are like underwater pools are like incredible therapy for kids on the spectrum, kids with social anxiety issues, things like that. And so we were like looking at it as like a real investment for him, right? And obviously, I want to go tanning in my
Everybody. Yeah.
thong
Skivvies.
skivvies. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm sure everybody wants to see that in
Yeah.
Collierville. But anyway, we just made it was like instead of basically getting a whole new mortgage that we would have to do to get a pool in, I was like, let's just go start looking for houses that maybe have a pool already built in, and then we could use that. And then that immediately was like, I don't want to move, man. Like, I don't want to move.
Because y'all been
Moving is
there for a while,
terrible.
right?
Yeah, we moved in literally a week before Silas was born. So he's about to be 11. So we've been there for 10 years.
Yeah. No, it's not fun. But you've moved like across the country, across the world. So I mean,
Yeah.
you've been there, done that.
Yeah.
But we did it in stages, so it wasn't as terrible. It wasn't like, okay, here's everything, let's get it all out. Like when they first listed the house, we pretty much packed everything that wasn't a necessity. So it's been in stages, so it wasn't as bad.
Yeah.
Um,
I tell people all the time, like if you want to find out if the person you're going to be with is like is someone that you can survive with, like someone a long lasting marriage,
go
there's
through a
two things
move.
to do: go through a move or go canoeing with that person. You
Those
know,
are polar opposite things.
but have you ever canoed with a
Yeah,
significant other? It's
yeah, you got to be on the same page.
you got to be on the same
Yeah,
page, man. It ain't
that's
no
true.
joke.
All right, well, it sounds like we both had pretty lackluster weekend. So let's get into some Memphis basketball, which a little bit of back and forth, a little bit of 50-50. They played Temple
Right.
and Charlotte over the past week, which we talked about a little bit last week. And the expectation was go beat both of those teams that you're clearly better than.
Yeah.
Temple, they did not. They didn't handle
No.
business whatsoever in that game. Temple really controlled the majority of that game. So
Yeah.
lost to Temple, would come back, handle Charlotte pretty handily. Would they win by 9 in that game? So
Yeah, they were up by 22 points with 3 minutes left in the game, and then the ref started reffing and
right.
rough, but they ended up winning by 9.
Yeah, so it was pretty polar opposites this week, and so I think kind of where we want to land on this is takeaways from that, because we have talked ad nauseum about this conference schedule, about how boring it's going to be, about how it's hard to be excited for, not only for fans but for players also. And I think maybe we saw a little bit of that this week in those two games. But for you, what's the big takeaway from a loss against Temple and a win over Charlotte?
Yeah, like my one key takeaway from this past week, obviously losing to Temple was a disappointing thing. Coming back and playing Charlotte is just not good. Like they
No.
are not a good basketball program. And I mean, I saw multiple tweets from Charlotte fans on Twitter saying there's more Memphis fans than Charlotte fans in this arena, like just like just devastated by where the program is now. And I get that. Like it's got to be a tough situation.
I was just looking at it as you were saying that. Would you like to know the attendance of that game?
It was ugly, I'm sure. What was it?
3,800.
Yeah, that's the El Marone Fieldhouse. That is
Yeah.
literally like a few hundred less than the El Marone Fieldhouse. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at a lot of the home games, home arenas for some of the AAC teams, and bro, it's looking like you're playing at like Bartlett High School or something
For
like
real.
that. Terrible. Terrible. But I think I've kind of titled this portion of the season as landmine season, right? Like every game is a landmine. Every
Yeah.
game is a potential landmine. And I think there's a reality to the idea that every time Memphis goes on the road in the conference, they are literally playing the other team's Super Bowl that year.
Yeah,
And
they have nothing to gain but everything to lose every single game.
I mean, and it's like you have to there has to be a level of like understanding of that when you go into an opposing team's arena, no matter how small it is, no matter what the team's record is, it is their Super Bowl. The Temple coach, and here's the thing, Christian, Temple is not a bad team. Like they're not good, but they're in terms of like the conference. If you're talking about the conference, I would say they're top 3 in the conference, and which Memphis has already played all of the top teams in the conference outside of the preseason pick, which was UAB. But in terms of metric rankings and all that kind of stuff, they've played all the best teams in the conference so far, and won every game except for the Temple game. But it's you go into those games and you say like you have to be on your P's and Q's because
Yeah.
every game when you go on the road is a potential landmine for the Tigers. And I say this all the time, like there's not many times when I talk to coaches or when I talk to any media about like when I'm like I interviewed Dave Borges from Connecticut Daily Sun or something like that. He's the beat
Mhm.
writer for the Yukon Huskies. And I make a habit of asking the question of him of people like him is if you were to look at the box score at the end of the game, what 2 stats are you looking at to kind of tell the story of the game, right? And there's sometimes you can't do that. There's sometimes you can't look at a box score and say this is why this team lost and this is why this team won. Coming
Right.
out of the Temple game, there was no doubt. There was only one stat that showed why the Tigers lost that game, and that's because they were out rebounded 2-1 in that game.
Yeah.
2-1. Temple had 22 offensive rebounds. Memphis had 25 total rebounds in the game.
Yeah, as far as a takeaway goes, I kind of don't know where to go with it. Like, do I want to go negative with it? Do I want to try to shape it more positively and put a better spin on it? But the big thing is, and I totally agree with what you're saying. Like, you're getting everybody's best shot, even though you're not playing the best of teams. Like, you're their Super Bowl. They're game planning for you harder than they're game planning for anybody else. They're
Well,
playing
that's not.
harder.
I didn't finish my takeaway, but I'll let
Go
you
ahead.
keep
Sorry.
going.
Sorry. Go
No, you're
ahead.
good. You're good. Let me finish the takeaway. I'm long-winded, so I apologize. But
Nobody
the
knew that.
the takeaway is that we have discussed ad nauseum to the point where it's almost a little bit like, okay, it may be time to move on from the conversation about previous penny teams, right?
Right. Oh, yeah.
But you look at the 21 team, the 22 team, the 23 team, and you say, like, what is the key takeaway from a game like this last week, Temple Charlotte, compared to other, kind of away games that Memphis has played, in previous years for Penny? A lot of times you'll see Memphis go on long winning streaks and then multiple games in a row losses,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like last year, they won 3 conference games and then lost 4. Then they won 3 and then they lost 3.
And it's
Like
all like you said, for his whole tenure, it's been like that. And not the whole time. There have been
like
different times.
stacking losses on top of losses,
But how many
right?
times have we called Memphis seasons roller coasters? Because they take those
Right.
swings, like you said, like they'll win 3 really good games and then they'll drop a couple just inexcusable. So
Right. My takeaway is that I am impressed by the Tigers' ability to fix the things that needed to be fixed after that Temple game going into Charlotte. The things that plagued them in the Temple game, they fixed in the Charlotte game. It was the ultimate get right game for the Tigers, and they went in and they beat another team on the road in a conference where it's landmine season, landmine game after landmine game. They righted the ship rather quickly
yeah.
comparatively to other Tiger teams. And I think that's a good sign moving forward. That's my takeaway.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is that the margin for error is shrinking, and it's just unavoidable. I know that's kind of Captain Obvious statement, but it's true. And first off, on that, I'm kind of shocked that they didn't fall out of the top 25 just because of how things typically work with Memphis in the AP rankings. They're still at 24
Well,
even
I don't
after
know if
that
you
loss.
saw this. I don't know if you saw this. 19 of the 25 top 25 teams lost this weekend or this
Yeah,
past week.
yeah,
So there's a
that helped.
reason they stayed in the top 25.
Yeah,
That helped.
that helped them. But I still am kind of surprised that they didn't find a way to put
Yeah.
Memphis right on the outside looking in, because that's just typically how it goes. But it's that, look, I understand you're getting everybody's best shot. It's everybody's Super Bowl. Everybody's coming at you the hardest, but you're better than all of them.
Yeah.
On paper, on the
100%.
floor, any way you shape it, like you're better than every team in this conference, because this conference is just simply terrible. So we knew that they can afford a couple, but
Yeah.
you already dropped one early on
Yeah.
with Temple now, and you
Yeah.
just keep looking out the rest of the season and going, okay, I don't see any. There's nothing jumping out to me that says loss here. But if they can lose to Temple, they can lose to Arkansas State. Like, they can lose to bad teams on any given night, but
Mhm.
they can't afford to at this point, because the last thing that you want from this season, with the way that it started and how much success you had outside of conference, is to get in a situation where you make it to the conference, or we get to conference tournament time and they have to win it to
Yeah.
go into the NCAA tournament. Like, they're looking at being a bubble team again because they messed around in conference and didn't win enough games. And so to me, that's like the takeaway is, yes, they're good. They could win every single game in conference and I wouldn't be surprised, or they could lose 3 or 4 more and I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
And it's not because I don't think this team is good. I mean, we've seen the heights that this team can go, but we've also seen the lows. Like, losing Arkansas State and Temple is not great. And I know Temple is definitely a better team than Arkansas State. Like, Temple's not awful, but still, that's a team that you should go on the road and be able to win. And what were they?
Oh, if they hadn't been out rebounded by 2-1, I think they
Right.
would have won that game.
Yeah. I mean, they're
You know?
7.5-point favorites in that game.
Right.
The biggest concerning thing for me from that game, yes, the rebounding is up there, but 52 points in the second half is rough.
Yeah.
Like, allowing Temple to score 52 points
Yeah.
in the second half, because you you looked at that game and I think Temple was up by 8 or 9 at the half, And I was like, okay, like I don't feel terrible about this because we know Memphis can score. They can put points up quickly.
Right.
They just got to lock it in. But then they allow, it was either 51 or 52 points. Let me double check that.
It was
Yeah, 52.
52 to 51
52.
in the
They
second
they
half.
got
Yeah.
outscored by 1 point. It was 51 to 52 in the second half.
Right.
It's just like Memphis could have easily won that. I mean, they scored 51 points. That's a ridiculous half, but they couldn't stop Temple defensively. They couldn't do
Yeah.
anything defensively. Offensive rebounds or just lack of guarding, lack of size, all those different things adding up. So
Yeah.
I get it. It happens. Like you're
Yeah.
probably not going to go undefeated in conference, even in a bad conference, but there is no doubt that the margin for error shrunk after losing to Temple.
If you look at the remaining schedule, it's weird, Christian. It's 2 games at home, 2 games away, 2 games at home, 2 games away, 2 games at home, and then the final game at home against USF. And so there is, like, if you had to guess as you look at the schedule, what would you say is there's only one game that I look at and I go, okay, this is a game that the Tigers could lose. And I think they'll be favored to win, but I could see it being a game that they could go in and lose. I think it's the March 2nd UAB game.
That's what I was going to say. The away game against UAB, like that's the one that you look at and go, okay, UAB definitely has not been good. Like they haven't been great.
They have been kind of projecting up a little bit though since conference.
They have, what are they, 4-1 in conference now? I think.
Yeah, 4-1.
Yeah, they demolished Tulsa. They beat Tulane handily. They beat FAU by 5, and they beat South Florida by 9. So like they've pretty much handled their business in conference so far, which isn't saying much in a vacuum, but it's what you have to do. And if they keep building momentum, like, yes, they get Memphis at home on the 26th, but that's not a game that you circle and look at and go, Memphis could lose that game, with it being, like the old Memphis UAB rivalry, with it being at the FedEx Forum. It's like, okay, Memphis is probably going to win that game, but then going to Birmingham, playing against them, you could be caught looking forward to the conference tournament or potentially the NCAA tournament and seeding. I'm with you on that. I think that's the one that you look at and go, you could lose that game. Now, if you drop another 1 or 2 more in between that time, then it becomes a must win, and that changes the mentality a little bit.
Right. And that's the hard part, right? Like you do so well in non-conference, and then the problem is that in this conference, the teams are going to kind of cannibalize each other a little bit, and not because they're all so good like the SEC, but because they're all so bad. Any team can beat any team at any given time.
Right.
And so it's like, you got to be careful, because then you look up and you go, well, you look at the schedule and you look at the records and go, man, Memphis should absolutely be the number 1 seed, win the regular season, go into the tournament, number 1 seed in the AAC. And they could end up being 4th just because every other team has just been cannibalizing each other the entire time. And it's like, the next 3 games upcoming, they're coming back to play 2 here in Memphis. They're playing Wichita State and
then
Florida,
UAB,
and then UAB at home. And then they go on the road at Tulane. Obviously they've had issues with Tulane in the past in New Orleans. This Tulane team is terrible, but Ron Hunter is a good coach, and on the road, you just never know. It's going to be Tulane's Super Bowl for the year. So it's like,
and even when Penny first came to Memphis and they had terrible teams at Tulane, like they always played Memphis close on the road. Like, you remember what was it? I think they played twice that year. It was Precious's freshman year. Well, obviously the only year he was at Memphis, and it went to overtime. I think they split with Tulane that year. Like Memphis was so much better, and Tulane didn't have much, but they've always played them close in New Orleans.
Yeah. You just got to go. You got to win every home game in the conference. You cannot drop a home game in conference. And I think if you drop the UAB game in March, I think you'll be fine.
Yeah. But you can't do much more than that.
You can't do much more than that. So I'm in agreement with you. Their margin of error is nothing. Like they don't have one. So it'll be interesting, man. I do think that the Tigers have shown obviously in the Charlotte game, it was a nice game to go play on the road against a really bad Charlotte team. They did some things to get right. Saw Dante Harris kind of play some good minutes, some defensive minutes. He took Baraka Okoji's minutes this game, added some stuff on the offensive side of the floor, which was a nice surprise. That's kind of been the concern, I think, in terms of depth in the backcourt is just there's zero offense off the bench.
Off the bench, yeah.
If Dante can add anything, I think you're in good shape. But yeah, that's my key takeaway. And I think ours kind of coincide with each other, right? There is no margin for error.
Even though you're getting everybody's best shot.
Even though you're getting everybody's best shot. And I liked that I saw them fix the things that were fixable after the Temple game and make sure those things didn't happen again. And they clearly exerted their force on Charlotte and beat them on the road. Yep. And it's a good look. Tiger teams have not done that in the past. They have gone on 4-game losing streaks in conference.
Up and down.
You just cannot do that in this conference. You cannot lose 3 games or 4 games in a row in this conference and expect to be safe. Expect to be safe. Let me ask you this. Last question for you before we move on to the hot 3. If the Tigers lose one more road game in this conference, they're safe going into the conference tournament in terms of the NCAA tournament, don't you think?
Yeah. I think you have one. I think you could have one more inexcusable loss and still be fine. But then you start getting into the talk about seed line.
Yeah.
And what's the number that you get at that point? Let's say you do lose to UAB and you drop another just ugly one that you shouldn't have lost. Can you stay in that 4 to 6 seed line at that point, or do you drop back down to that 8 and 9 and you have the ultimate thing again of you might win your first round game, but then you have to play a 1 seed. So yes, the NCAA tournament is the goal, but we've seen Memphis make the NCAA tournament, and it's that 8-9 seed line every time. Getting that 4 to 6 seed would be so big for this team. If you come in playing a 13 seed and move on after that and not having to play a top seed would be huge for this team. But we'll see how it shakes out. We're going to take a quick break. We're coming off of divisional weekend right now. So after the break, we're going to talk all NFL playoffs in the hot 3.
Started in Memphis, then we went to Phoenix, and then I went to Phoenix with the guy who Jerry West, God rest his soul, told me was going to be an NBA player, who I told him was not an NBA player.
Right, and he got sent there.
He got straight, so we both get kicked out. You don't blame me, it was my fault. I have so many stories about the Phoenix time, why I was only there for 3. There's a real reason
I know.
why I was only 3 games. Dysfunctional at a high level.
Dysfunctional at a high level. To the point where you said, I need out.
Frank Johnson was the head coach, and we're at practice. It was a heated practice, so Frank takes us to the other end of the court. Why don't y'all let y'all play and let me coach? And bro, in the next breath it was, you can't coach.
Because you can't coach.
Damn.
So my buddy, Matrix was he just said it and stood there. I was like, oh damn.
Wow.
This shit ain't good.
Tune in to the Night Court podcast with your hosts, Rob Fisher and Brevin Knight, on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
What is this Grizzlies team full strength? You're talking about a team who's been second in the West most of the season with a boatload of injuries. We've lost more games to injuries than any team in the league, still finding a way to be second in the West. In my opinion, this team has another step to take in the coming weeks, in the coming month. Getting guys like a G.G. Jackson got back, getting a guy like Vince Williams back, getting Ja, Bane, Jaren all going at the same time. When those guys have been cooking, they had to, I think they went on a 9-game winning streak. They went from being around 500 to being the team that is second in the West when you had those guys gaining that chemistry.
In the midst of all the trade chatter, everything we talked about since the season began, since the offseason even, one thing we always stood by is that the team, if ever fully healthy, they're good, right?
I think that's the question that everybody's asked, right? I think it's even hindered some of the thoughts around moves that team could make with the roster because we haven't seen this Grizzlies team in full strength yet. Tune in to the Anthony Sane Show Wednesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. weekly on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel. Can you hear me?
There you sounded great.
What did I sound like?
You sounded like a child in the midst of puberty.
Nope.
I thought you had the worst voice crack of all time, and you were just powering through it. But
No voice crack for me.
I don't know if that was my speakers or your mic or what that was, but that was terrifying.
I hope it shows up on the
I
recording.
hope it
That would
does
be
too. I hope it
hilarious.
wasn't just on my end.
Oh, dude, listen. I will say I was stuck in the house all weekend taking care of my daughter, but that allowed me to watch every single game in the divisional playoffs, in the NFL playoffs.
Usually you have to miss a little bit.
Usually I have to miss some weekend action, but I got to watch all of it, and it was awesome. There were 2 games. Obviously, the 2 big games that I want to discuss with you, the Washington, Detroit, Buffalo, Baltimore games. But tell me the Kansas City game, what were your thoughts on it? The Philly game, what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, just quickly before we break down those a little more in depth, like with Kansas City and Houston, kind of just business as usual for Kansas City. The game was closed for the majority, but they found a way to pull it out. They did what they do. Like, it hasn't been pretty for them all year, but they finished basically, I know they're 15-2, but basically 15-1 because they rested all their starters in Week 18, and it's just what they do. They won close games all year. They found a way to win. If you make any kind of mistakes, they take advantage, and that's what they did in that game. They got outgained. Houston did not turn the ball over. I think they might have won the time of possession battle too. And Kansas City still won that game, and it never really felt like they were in too much danger, just because they do everything so well. Like, it's not perfect, it's not pretty, but they always find a way. You had Travis Kelce. Everybody's talked about him being washed all year. He has 117 yards. I think he broke Jerry Rice's record for most 100-yard games in the postseason. Patrick Mahomes only had 177 and a touchdown. They couldn't run the ball, but they still find a way, and that's what they do. As far as
Travis Kelce, if he plays well, he said he flips the switch in the playoffs.
Yeah.
It sounds good coming after a 117-yard game. You can say that, right? You can say I flip switches during the playoffs. If he emerges and plays the way that Travis Kelce has played in the playoffs in the past, like, does Kansas City become super tough to beat?
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's kind of what everybody expected from him is they're kind of just taking it game by game during the regular season, doing enough to win, and then in the playoffs, like, they have a different gear because they've done it every year for the past. I mean, this is their 7th consecutive AFC Championship game. So
crazy. It's crazy.
All of them do. Like, Chris Jones was ridiculous in that game, and he had been pretty quiet throughout the regular season. He flipped the switch. George Karlaftis, I think he had 2.5 sacks in that game. So that's what they do. They know how to play in January, and that's why they're going to their 7th straight AFC Championship game and hosting their 6th out of the last 7th AFC Championship game.
Crazy. All right, let's go to the Eagles game then. Jalen Hurts threw for 125 yards.
Yeah,
but Saquon Barkley did his thing, man.
That's kind of what they've been doing as of late. And I think Jalen Hurts got banged up in the game too. He got rolled up a little bit, looked like his knee or ankle or something.
Yeah.
And so that changed things a little bit, but he didn't have to do much. I mean, Saquon ran for 205 yards and 2 touchdowns, and they didn't have to really rely on the passing game. They led the whole game, so they didn't have to have any of those, drives where it's quick, 2-minute, throw the ball 10 times on that drive. So he did what he had to do, and I think they said after the game, we'll see how he's doing this week. So obviously that's something to monitor going to the NFC Championship game. But it didn't favor the Rams at all. I mean, snow, ice, cold, that's not what the Rams want to play in at all. I don't think Stafford's ever – I know he played in Detroit forever, but that's a dome. He never has really been a cold weather quarterback, even though he had to go to Soldier Field and Lambeau and all that. It's not his strong suit, and especially since he's been in LA for the past 4 or 5 years.
He's gotten soft, Christian. He's gotten soft.
A little bit, but it just kind of felt like one of those games where the Rams didn't have a chance. Even late in the game, they get the ball back to make the stop, a little bit of momentum. But I don't know. It didn't feel right. It felt clunky for them the whole game, and they couldn't get anything going. It felt like Philly kind of dominated that whole game, even though LA had a chance to win it at the end. It felt like it was Philly's game to lose.
Well, let's get to the two games that I think everybody's excited to talk about. Detroit and Washington played in Detroit. Everybody's been crowning Detroit already going into the playoffs. I mean, and I don't think it's an unfair thing. They're 15-2 on the year. I mean, just incredible. They're the best team in the NFL the entire year, I would say. The storylines with Washington have been quite intriguing, right? Like they get back to the playoffs. They a rookie quarterback, a guy that you have liked, from the beginning when he was drafted. And that Washington team is just a fun team. And you just go, what if? But I think everybody in their right mind thought Detroit was going to win that game.
Yeah, I mean, Detroit was 9.5-point favorites in this game, like you said.
Right.
In my opinion, at least, they've been the best team in the league for pretty much the entire season, offensively, defensively. I think it was a couple things, though. Obviously, the attrition added up on defense. They, had, I think it was something like 8 or 9 players total for the whole team that were on IR.
Yeah.
Then they had injuries in this game. Amik Robertson, I don't know if you saw that, broke his arm. That was gross.
Nasty.
But that was a big loss for them. I know he's not a huge name, but he was helping out a lot in the secondary and it really stepped up down the stretch. So I think defensively, they didn't have anything left to throw at them, and Washington's been pretty dynamic offensively all year.
Yeah.
And then I think they were almost too aggressive for their own good. Like when Jamison Williams throws that interception, it's like you don't have to do that. Like Washington doesn't have some great defense where you have to have these trick plays drawn up. Like you're moving the ball fine. You're not having any troubles moving the ball. The only thing that's stopping you really all game is turnovers. They had 4 interceptions in this game. One was, at the end, they were down 14, but the rest were meaningful. You had the one from Jamison Williams, you had the pick 6, and you had another golf interception in there as well. So it was really turnovers and then defensive attrition to me, and then Washington capitalizing on that. I don't want to get too much into Jayden Daniels. We'll talk about him here in a little bit, but just as a team, what they've been able to do, like Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, completely turned this team around. They brought in some key free agents, Bobby Wagner, Frankie Louvu, drafted Mike Sanderstrill from Michigan. You got, Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne playing like the players that they are. And so it's pretty crazy that they turned it around that quickly to go from, a pretty common bottom feeder to a team that's now going to the NFC Championship in year 1 for Dan Quinn and Jayden Daniels.
Yeah. So we're going to get into Jayden Daniels in the third topic of the Hot 3, but I wanted to ask you, just in the NFC Championship, right? You got Philly, you've got Washington. Washington can win that game, can't they?
Yeah, I mean they beat them in week 15 or 16.
Yeah,
I know Jalen Hurts got injured in that game, and it was Kenny Pickett, but it was still, I think it was 36-33. And the big thing about Philly is their defense. I mean, they've been pretty much the whole season the best defense in the league, and Jayden Daniels shredded them in that game. And he went down at the end and won that game like he's done all year. He's been great in the clutch. And so they definitely can win this game, because if they're able right now with how Jalen Hurts is playing, if they're able to slow down the run at all, they have the advantage. Because I don't know if it's, the concussion and, the injury after that happened this week, or play calling, synergy between him and Kellen Moore, whatever it may be. Like Jalen Hurts, since the Super Bowl 2 years ago, has just not been the same quarterback that it looks like he can go win you a game.
Right.
Kind of just been more of a game manager, and that's kind of been his role since then.
Yeah.
And so they forced Jalen Hurts to beat him. I don't know, because they just stood toe-to-toe with the best offense in the league, and they were able to outscore them. So if they can slow down the run, they're not going to stop Saquon, but they can slow him down a little bit, continue to do what they've done offensively, they absolutely can win this game.
Man, what a crazy story. And I'll ask you some questions about Jayden Daniels and his all that kind of stuff in the third subject of the Hot 3, our third topic. But what a crazy story that would be if Jayden Daniels takes the Washington Commanders to the Super Bowl in his first year. Crazy. All right. Yeah. Now let's get to the AFC Divisional Championship. Buffalo versus Baltimore. I think everybody walked into this weekend going, this is the must-see game of the year, probably, right? Like the game that's probably going to be the best game in in the playoffs, honestly. It was phenomenal. It was a great game to watch. What were your thoughts?
I was honestly a little underwhelmed by
Were
this
you?
game. Yeah, I was, because
There's a lot of drama in the game. That's what I like.
there definitely was, but I think me and Gabe said it last week. There were so many different ways that we could see this game playing out. Like, we could see it being like a grind you down, both teams trying to run the ball, and defense is playing well, or a shootout where it's Lamar versus Josh Allen, the two MVP front runners, and it kind of landed somewhere in the middle. Like, there were 52 points scored in the game, so the over hit, and there was a decent amount of scoring, but it never felt like either offense got fully into rhythm.
Well,
Maybe
I think the snow played a role in that, right? Like, I think the weather played a role in that as well.
Possibly, but I think the only time it really felt like that was the end of the first half, where I think Buffalo had consecutive touchdown drives, to Josh Allen rushing touchdowns. But outside of that, it was kind of clunky. It was like, one team would go down and score. Maybe a response didn't come after that, and it was a couple drives later until someone else scored. I don't know. It was fun, like you said. There was a lot of drama. It came down to the last play, but maybe my expectations were too high for this one. But overall, I mean, it was a good game. I'm not saying it wasn't. It was a solid, good playoff game, but I was cheering for the shootout. I wanted Lamar and Josh kind of going against each other, and you had Josh, who only had 127 passing yards because they really controlled the time of possession in this game and capitalized on Baltimore making mistakes, the Lamar Jackson fumble in the first half, and Josh didn't have to do much. I mean, he had 2 rushing touchdowns, but only had 127 yards. You had Lamar throwing an interception and having that terrible fumble. Most of his yardage came later in that game as they were playing catch-up. So it wasn't like the MVP clash that I was hoping it was, but it was solid AFC divisional playoff game.
How much do you – I know that the team, the Baltimore players and coaches have all come out and said, listen, man, none of this is on Mark Andrews. But have you seen a guy of his caliber have such an awful game in one of the most important? I mean, dude, he had an awful game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are examples. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but for somebody like him, who's a perennial top 5 tight end in the league, to have the fumble, which he had wide open, like he could have just went down the middle of the field, and I don't know why he tried to cut back and go against the grain and go up under the defender.
He had the first down. He should have just gone to the ground, right?
Right. Like, loses a fumble, has a chance to send the game into overtime, and lost that one too. And so for somebody like him, he's usually extremely reliable too. Like, he might not be the flashiest player in the league, but he is usually super reliable. To lose a fumble, to drop the potential game-tying 2-point conversion attempt, like, it was rough. He had to be sick after that one. That was a tough game for him. Him and Lamar both. Like, that was tough games from 2 of their 3 best offensive players.
Yeah, it was rough. All right, let's get to the third topic. We've talked about a lot over these last couple of weeks. The quarterback play this year has been pretty good this year. Like, there's been a lot of really cool stories, a lot of emergence from other guys who have been kind of cast off throughout their career. Unfortunately, those guys sputtered in the playoffs, most of them. Yeah. And it's the same old guys, right? It's the Lamars, it's the Josh Allens, it's the Patrick Mahomes, it's those guys. It's the Jalen Hurts who are going to be, moving on and playing in the Super Bowl or playing for the Super Bowl at the end of the year. There's a lot of really interesting stories, I think, coming out of these playoffs about the quarterbacks. Let's walk through some of them. Patrick Mahomes, one of your favorites, the GOAT, right? Like, would you say he's playing in 7 straight AFC championship games?
Yeah. I think it's kind of fun to look at it as a whole, right? Because you have so many different storylines, and just cherry picking a few. Like, you just brought up Patrick Mahomes. He's won 3 Super Bowls already. He's been to 7 AFC championship games. He has now tied for the second most playoff wins of all time with Joe Montana at 16, and he's, 28 or 29 years old.
So wild.
The only one in front of him now is Brady at 35, which is still a big mountain to climb, but I don't think anybody doubts it at this point. So you've got him, and then you've got Lamar, who's like widely viewed as top 2-3 quarterback in the league, who cannot get over the hump. Like, the playoffs has been his kryptonite. He's won 2 MVPs, could be a third in the next couple of weeks if he wins it this year.
Do you like him for it?
I think Josh Allen's probably gonna win it. Just a little bit of voter fatigue with Lamar already having 2, and they say the playoffs don't come into account, but human nature, like I don't know if the votes are cast before or what. If they're not, there's just no way that the playoffs don't affect voting at all. I just don't believe that. Even if they put that in any guideline for MVP voters, you're human. You watch the game, you see the other quarterback win. There's something involved there. So I think Josh will win it. But Lamar he can't get over the hump in the playoffs at all. He's typically pretty turnover prone. He has not had his best games. And you look at those 2 MVP seasons in this season, like the regular season, he's been able to do whatever he wants to on the ground, in the air, limited turnovers. This year, I think, was, in my opinion, by far his best year. I know the rushing stats weren't what they were in 2019 when he won his first one. Last year, I think, was a little bit of there just weren't many options. This year, I think he was incredible, throwing the ball, running the ball. But it comes to the playoffs, and he didn't have to do much, really, in the game against Pittsburgh. That was kind of the Derrick Henry game. And then this week, the stats don't look bad when you look back at them now. But if you watch the game, the interception that he threw early in the game, there was no point scored off of it. But the fumble was massive. The fumble was, the difference in that game. And so you have him, and then you have someone like Jayden Daniels, who's in his rookie year.
Man.
Had one of the best quarterback rookie seasons that we've seen in NFL history, and is taking a team that has been terrible. And really, when you look at their roster top to bottom, they're not a great team. They don't have a bunch of talent. It's really him and Terry McLaurin and Brian Robinson. Offensively, outside of that, they don't have much. It's Olamide Zaccheaus and De'Ami Brown and Jamison Crowder and Austin Eckler, all these vets that nobody else wanted. Offensive line isn't great. Defense hasn't been great, but he's found ways to win games at the end of games. And so you have him as a rookie who's going to the NFC Championship with the team that hasn't been, I think, since 91 was the last time. 91 or 92 was the last time they had been to an NFC Championship game. So it's cool when you look back and kind of look at the overarching quarterback stories, and you can point to more, but I think those are the 3 that really stick out.
I mean, I think one of the best storylines, we'll go back to Jayden Daniels in a second, is the Josh Allen Patrick Mahomes matchup, right? Yeah. They constantly are battling each other in the playoffs. This
is the 4th time since 2020. They've played every year in the playoffs except, I think, maybe 21. I don't remember what year, but they've played every year in the playoffs except one now.
I mean, can Josh Allen get over the Patrick Mahomes hump? That's the question, right?
Yeah, and the thing is so Buffalo pretty much dominated that game against Kansas City in the regular season. So they really, if you look at it, Buffalo was the only team that beat Kansas City. Yes, Kansas City lost in Week 18, but that was all backups. Buffalo is the only team that beat Kansas City all year, and they did it pretty handily. But
this is the playoffs.
The playoffs is a different animal than he is in the regular season. I don't know. I think Buffalo has the team to do it, but you at this point you can't bet.
You can't bet against Patrick Mahomes.
You can't. No matter if you look player for player or resume throughout the season, or them actually playing head to head in the season. I don't think you'd find many people that would pick Buffalo over Kansas City, just because Josh Allen hasn't been able to do it in the playoffs, and Patrick Mahomes has been able to do it in the playoffs.
He's done it consistently for 7 straight years.
Right.
Let's go back to Jayden Daniels for a second. I love the storyline. I think his story arc is so incredible, and I hate this is a first take kind of question, but I want you to get past it for a second. Okay. I know you hate those kinds of questions, but does these 2 wins in the playoffs in his rookie year, does it rocket him up the pantheon of where quarterback standings and like top quarterbacks in the league right now?
I don't think that's a crazy question. I think it's tricky though, because I think we did this with CJ Stroud last year, right?
Right.
And he had the sophomore slump and didn't look as great this year because everybody was calling him like a top 5, top 7 quarterback coming into the season.
But how far did Houston go in the playoffs?
Last year?
Last year.
Divisional round.
They went to divisionals? Okay.
Yeah. So, and I mean, CJ, and that same situation, like a team that hadn't been great, was looking for something, it took them from worst to first. I think the big thing with Jayden Daniels, though, is, the overall stats have been impressive, but it's the way that they have won games. Like, they have been on his shoulders.
On his shoulders, yeah.
I mean, you go back to the Hail Mary against Chicago, or going down late against the Saints, or going down late against the Eagles a few weeks ago. Like, I think he's had like 5 or 6 game-winning drives as a rookie quarterback, and that just doesn't happen. So does it? I mean, I think right now it has to. Like, you can't take away what he's done. We can't say, oh, look what CJ Stroud did in year 2. We can't crown Jayden Daniels yet. And it's like, that's kind of unfair to Jayden Daniels, because all we can do is look at the body of work that he's currently put together. And that, that 1 year, those 19 games that he played so far have been arguably the best rookie season in NFL history. So they
have the shot to go to the Super Bowl, and a good shot to go to the Super Bowl.
Right. Almost 50-50 share, probably 55-45 they go to the Super Bowl.
Right? I mean, because Philly's good, but Philly's not a team that he's not going up against a Patrick Mahomes that's won 7 straight, AFC championships, played in 7 straight. Like, there is a level of that Philly matchup. You can go, he can go in there and win that game.
And the biggest thing about it is a divisional game.
Right.
And we say all the time, regular season playoffs, like, you kind of throw away the records in divisional games for the most part. Like, these are teams that are extremely familiar with each other. They've played each other twice this season. Like, they know each other's tendencies. And take it back even further than that, Dan Quinn's been coaching the NFC East for the last 4 years. Like, he knows Philly extremely well. He coached, against them twice a year in Dallas as well. So, like, this is a team that he's extremely familiar with. There hasn't been a lot of turnover in Philadelphia, as far as personnel wise over the last several years since he's been in Dallas and now in Washington. So he knows his team very well. And I think that sometimes that can give one team more of an advantage. And I think in this case, it probably gives Washington more of an advantage because, Philly's played them twice this year, but I just feel like there's more. It feels like there's more for Philly to lose in this game than it is for Washington. Washington's playing with house money right now.
House money, man.
Them making the playoffs was house money. So getting to the NFC Championship, Cliff Kingsbury, Dan Quinn, Jayden Daniels, it's like, go let it all hang out. Like, everything's on the table. Throw the kitchen sink.
Yep.
They don't have to play tight at all, and I think Philly does.
I think Philly, and here's the thing. I think Philly might play tight. Like, that's we've seen Nick Sirianni do some things, right? Like, or Sirianni, however you say his name. Like, we've seen him be a little bit tight at times.
Right.
I wonder if that pressure of, we have to beat this rookie quarterback, we have to do this, with Jayden Daniels going, hey, bro, I'm playing with house money over here, man.
Right.
And I
don't think it would matter what situation Daniels is in. He always plays free. Like,
let me ask you this.
I want to play tight.
What is from what you can tell, like, this has been, his rookie season has been an incredible. I mean, he's been incredible this year. Clearly a franchise quarterback. Clearly, for Washington. What are some of the characteristics about his game that you think kind of has set him apart? Because everybody can throw the ball pretty well in the NFL. He can throw the deep ball extremely well. He can run. A lot of quarterbacks can run. But what makes him, like, and especially in his rookie season, different?
I think it's kind of what I was just saying. Like, he's always loose. Like, he never looks tight. The moment's never too big. I don't know. He's always relaxed. And it's funny that you asked. I actually saw something last night on Twitter that was saying when he was coming to LSU from Arizona State, there was this VR company that was did you see this?
Yeah.
Like, they were failing. They were about to flame out. and they were trying to design. I think they were doing hockey or soccer. So I think it was hockey that they were trying to get in this VR stuff with. And they started putting out stuff about football, and it fell into the hands of some people at LSU, and they wanted to do it. And so Jayden started doing it. It was after his first year at LSU. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Because he had like a subpar year his first year at LSU. He was okay, but not great. It was like, okay, he can run a little bit, but outside of that, he doesn't look like anything special. And then apparently he started doing this VR training at 1.75 speed. So he's doing things faster.
So what he's looking at is he looking at formations and
yes,
defenses.
He's looking at a defense, like he's playing quarterback
at 1.7 speed.
Right.
So it's faster than okay.
Yeah, so it's going faster than the game already goes. And obviously what that helps with is processing speed. Like you see things quicker. So if you're say you're in college, we know the NFL is faster, but if you're in college and you're watching at 1.75 speed, you're probably watching or doing this virtual reality at NFL speed and then going and playing a college game. He required whatever team he got drafted to use this virtual reality system.
Wow.
Like it was a non-negotiable for him. Whoever took him, he had to have this VR system. He had to be able to do this. At Cliff Kingsbury, Dan Quinn, Josh Harris, who's the owner of the Commanders, were completely on board. They were like, absolutely. So now NFL 1.75 speed. He's playing slower than everybody else. His processing is so fast. And I think early in the season it was, Cliff Kingsbury's designed this college offense for him where he can throw these screens and these slants and these RPOs. But it really didn't take long. Really, that Cincinnati game, which was like week 2 or week 3, they really started opening it up for him.
Yeah.
And it's not that, this is college RPO offense. It's that he's processing way faster than the game, way faster than the games actually happen. Like the game is so slow for him, and you can see that.
Which makes sense because I tweeted this the night of the game. I said, one of the things that makes Jayden Daniels so good to me is his conviction in which he makes decisions.
Yeah.
Right? Like he makes a decision and goes.
He doesn't look hesitant.
At all. And that was before the VR interview or the VR article came out.
Yeah.
And that makes total sense because he's seeing things slower and he's just doing it. He's just going boom, go. And whether it's run, whether it's pass, how he's making his reads, he has conviction of his decisions. And that is something that I think, especially as a young guy, as a young rookie quarterback, you're not supposed to have it that quickly. You're not supposed to be able to make decisions like that, like on a dime and just go. And sometimes he might make a mistake, but he's going. And
he's never hesitant.
Not hesitant. And that's a good thing. I love his game. I love where he's at, but it's going to be a fun championship weekend, man. I'm excited about it.
Yep, absolutely. All right, well, we're going to wrap it up. We appreciate you guys for joining us this week. If you're watching on YouTube, you can like, subscribe, and comment there. If you're listening via podcast, whether that's Apple, Spotify, or any other podcast platform, you can do all the same there. You can also go to the site, bluffcitymedia.co, check out all the articles, podcasts, and videos on the site. Once again, we thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you back here next week.
Thank you for listening to On the Bluff. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a rating and a review wherever you download your podcasts. Also, like and subscribe to Bluff City Media's YouTube page. Head over to www.bluffcitymedia.co for comprehensive coverage of Memphis sports and how you can become an insider.